Good day, I'm PAMINTUan from Group 3 here to report the role of corporate governance. What is corporate governance? It is concerned on how a corporation or company will behave inside a office. You might be wondering if there is a difference between corporate governance and corporate social responsibilities. Although these modern days they are usually being fused together. The main difference is corporate governance is how you will act inside a company, and CSR is how you will act outside the company, and what can you do to contribute to make the community to be more environmentally sustainable, and how can you portray or the image of your brand and the shareholders of your company. Good corporate governance, it is usually used to attract investors, and if someone invests or a premium is often reflected in the price of securities of companies that practice good corporate governance. So what is sound governance? It is basically the same. It attracts investors. But sound governance is practiced by managers or agents, and they lead to superior financial performance. But the disadvantage is the managers might practice self-interest and go astray from what the shareholders want the company to be. The modern corporation, the separation of owners or shareholders and management. So what is a corporation, first and foremost? It is a mechanism created to allow different parties to contribute capital, expertise, and labor for the maximum benefit of each party. Due to the separation of owners, the agency theory was made where it is separated, or the owners, which is called principals, are different persons from managers or what we call agents. So, agency theory. It is concerned with resolving two problems that can occur in agency relationships. The first one is when the goals of the principals and agents conflict. That basically means if the principal or shareholder has a different way of interpreting the business compared to how the agents or the managers interpret how the business works. And the second one is when it is difficult or expensive for principal to verify what the agent is actually doing. Of course, as a shareholder, investor, or owner, you need to keep an eye on the agents that you hire or the managers, and you need to make sure that they are doing their best for the corporation and they are not practicing any sort of self-interest or self-pleasure. Governance mechanisms aligning interests of owners and managers. To minimize the potential for managers to act in their own self-interest, or opportunistically, the owners can implement some governance mechanism. Those two primary means of monitoring the behavior managers are a committed and involved board of directors that acts in the best interest of the shareholders to create long-term value, and the second one is shareholder activism. A committed and involved board of directors. The board of directors are there to bridge the gap between the owners and the managers, so there won't be any miscommunication or no one will go astray from the interest of the owner or shareholder. The business roundtable. The first one is they make the decisions whether who is fit and well qualified to be in the position of CEO, whether that CEO is ethical and will it do what must be done in order for the corporation to be successful. The second one is directors monitor management on behalf of corporation shareholders. They make sure that if any agents or managers were to undergo affairs with different companies or partnerships, they make sure that the managers don't act upon themselves and keep the mission of the company aligned to what the shareholder wants. The third one is to represent all interests of shareholders. There are 9 interests in my presentation, but to put it simple, the board of directors should always be there to bridge the gap between principals and agents. They should be there to act as a guidance and give advice to how an agent will act upon a situation. They should be there to ensure that what happens in the company gets reported to the principals, and they review, understand, and oversee any plans, budgets, or usually anything that is involved with company assets. Several actions that can have a positive influence on board dynamics. The first one is build in the right expertise on the board. Keep your board size manageable. Choose directors who can participate fully. Balance the need to focus on the past, the present, and the future. Consider management talent and development in a broad view. And lastly, maintain norms of transparency and trust. Shareholder activism is the second mean of monitoring the behavior of managers. It is where the principals act upon themselves if they notice any acts of self-interest from the agents. They make sure that the company performs under their interest and not the personal interests of the agents. There are 4 shareholder rights. The first one is the right to sell the stock, the right to vote the proxy. The third one is to hold someone accountable if there is any sort of damage within the corporation. And the third one is the right to certain information and the right to residual rights following the company's liquidation. In order for the agents to obey the interests of principals, we have what we call managerial rewards and incentives. It is a system that is designed to help a company achieve its goals. There are 3 basic policies for proper monetary incentives. First one is boards can require that CEOs become substantial owners of company stock. Salaries, bonuses, and stock options can be structured as to provide rewards for superior performance and penalties for poor performance. The third one is dismissal or termination for any sort of poor performance within the company. CEO duality, is it good or bad? It is one of the most controversial issues in the corporate governance. It refers to whether a CEO is fit or has the right to be the same person as the chair of board of directors. That's why we have the 2 schools of thought that represent alternative positions. The first school of thought is unity of command. It is where it is agreed upon whether that the CEO can be the same person as the chair of board of directors because he or she is able to act more efficiently and effectively. And in unity of command, it is agreed upon that if the CEO and chairperson of the board of directors are 2 different persons, there might be or they might produce all types of undesirable consequences. And the second school of thought is the agency theory, where the supporters are agreed that there should be principals, which is the owners or CEOs, and the agents, which is the managers. It is because CEO duality can create a conflict of interest that could negatively affect the interests of shareholders. External governance control mechanisms. If all else fails, the market for corporate control, the risk of a hostile raider, which is a person or a party that comes in a corporation, buys in a position that has enough power or control that it can change or shift the direction of the corporation and making the value of the corporation higher once again. Example for external governance is auditors. Managers may deliberately disclose false information or withhold negative financial information. Second one is banks and analysts. Their access to information, their knowledge of the industry and the firm, and the insights they gain from interactions with the management of the company enable them to alert the investing community of both positive and negative developments relating to a certain company. And the next one is governmental regulatory bodies. The extent of government regulation is often a function of the type of industry. Public corporations are subject to more regulatory requirements than private corporations. And lastly, media and public activists. The first is usually not recognized as external control mechanisms in literature on corporate governance. That's all. I hope you learned a thing or two from my report.